In this video, we're covering 3 ways to fix your volunteer schedule. Let's talk about it.
Hey, we are Ted and Lisa Snyder, and we are nonprofit consultants because we know that a better world needs healthier nonprofits. Now, talking about volunteerism today, we have a lot of experience in this area.
I worked at a nonprofit full-time, leading a team of volunteers for over 10 years, and it started out as a team of like 5 to 15 volunteers, and it grew into a large team of over 120 volunteers at one point. And let me tell you, the thing that was the hardest for me, and I think was the hardest for pretty much everybody else in the organization and a lot of other nonprofits that we talk to, is scheduling volunteers, making sure that you have your schedules full, making sure that you have enough people showing up to get the stuff done. And it was super stressful. It felt like we were always trying to catch up. I remember one week having a full schedule, and then on Friday, 2 days before showtime, we needed 3 of the people backed out, and that was half of the team. So I was scrambling all day Saturday just to find 3 people to fill in the rest of the team so that we had what we needed to have. And that wasn't a one-time occurrence.
Right.
That kind of thing happened on a pretty regular basis until we learned a few tricks that really helped us get it under control.
Listen, this caused so much chaos, not just for Ted and for me as we were leading all these different volunteers and trying to care for them, but also in our home, with our family, with our friends, with our schedule, Friday nights trying to, fix the issues and get things figured out. And it wasn't just at one location. There were times that we were scheduling multiple high-skilled teams across multiple locations with people that we didn't even see face-to-face on a consistent basis. And so whatever you're doing within your organization, if you're starting to feel that where you're like, I am consistently running to keep up, and these volunteers might be the death of me, we have some things that actually will help you fix your volunteer schedule and get you to a place where you're no longer running after it, trying to get just not get buried by the chaos, but actually come out on the other side healthy.
Yeah, we were at a point where we were about to hit just a complete wall with this and say, if we can't get this fixed, we're done. We have to be done, because it was so overreaching into every part of our lives. And we looked everywhere. Like we studied tons of books, and I was looking on YouTube and trying to find resources, and like there was just nothing out there. They were just like, oh, if you need more volunteers, go look, ask, put up flyers. And I'm like, that's no.
It can help, but
that could help, but not what I need. Like what we need is great high skilled people, and I'm like scraping the bottom of the barrel, and I could tell that things were about to get worse, because if I started relying heavily on the people who were really committed and asking them to do more, it was going to blow up and completely collapse into a situation where everybody had to quit because they couldn't handle it in their schedules either.
Yeah, too often when leaders are drowning, what they do is rely on the people they feel like they can rely on, which means those people end up carrying much more than they originally agreed to when they decided that they were going to join our team. And when we increase their expectations without permission, tell them it's a short-term issue, and then can't figure out how to get out of it, we end up burning them out, which puts us as leaders in an even worse position. And teams spiral so fast. And we've seen this time and time again, consulting with different nonprofits, where you'll have a leader who went from being pretty good to getting a little bit out of control to just having nothing of a team left in a very short amount of time. So let's talk about 3 ways to fix this, because we want to see you be able to succeed in your organization.
The first thing that I learned was out of sheer desperation. One day I was just like, I have to change the way that I'm doing this, right? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I was looking at 2 months worth of schedule that was completely empty, and I needed to fill them all in. And the beginning of this 2 months was this next weekend. So I had 8 weekends that I had to make sure I had volunteers set up for a church service. And I was looking at all of it, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to go and take care of this weekend, and then I'm going to take care of the next weekend. I'm going to take care of the weekend after that. And I'm just going to get them all scheduled. And that statement went through my mind. If you keep doing the things the same way, you're just going to keep getting the same results. So I was like, let's just do a little change and see what happens. And I started at the end of the schedule and worked toward the closest weekend to me. So I started at the end of the 2 months and worked backwards. And that completely started a chain reaction that changed everything. Because guess what? I learned people don't have plans 2 months out. So it was actually pretty easy to get people to be, oh yeah, I'll commit to that weekend. Boom. That weekend was taken care of, and it took only a matter of minutes. And then the earlier weekend, I was like, okay, I'm going to contact like another set of volunteers to see if we can get that filled in. And boom, a week before that end of 2 month, that was filled in almost no time at all. And it worked like that pretty much for that entire second month out. Was super easy to fill. And I was like, all right, this is looking really good. But I still don't have anybody for this weekend. And that stress was starting to creep on me. But then I was like, no, this is working. I'm going to keep doing this.
And what was interesting about this is when you would call for 2 months out or 8 weekends out, starting with that one, you could have all of the conversations with the volunteers working all the way back to this weekend, depending on if they had agreed to every other weekend or once a month, or if it was dependent on their schedule. So you were able to do that. But because you were starting with weekend 8, people didn't feel that pressure or that desperation of a leader calling saying, please, I need your help right now. They were like, oh, he's scheduling further out. Things must be good. And people just naturally feel more confident saying yes when they feel like there's a leader who is not scrambling or desperate to get them in.
Or disorganized.
And
it was doing all of those things for me. And I quickly realized that if I can just do this, it takes way less effort to schedule a weekend further in advance. So I should always be starting at the furthest out and working backward. And yeah, there were a few things that happened over the course of those 2 months. Like somebody got sick or, had a family issue come up or whatever. But it's a lot easier to fill in 1 or 2 spots than to try to fill out a whole team 1 or 2 weeks ahead of time.
And if you only have to fill in 1 or 2 spots here and there, and people know that you've been working 2 months out, when you call and say something came up and the person I had scheduled had something go on, they're more likely to help because they recognize that it wasn't a disaster of your own making.
Right.
There are so many times where as leaders, we run after whatever is urgent and whatever is screaming the loudest. But what our volunteers see is someone who failed to plan. And so they look at it and they say, but you didn't plan, and I don't feel like I should have to step in and rescue you because I already have plans for this weekend. And so what it does is build trust up with the volunteers when you can start scheduling further out. Now, if you are not in a position where you are using massive amount of people, let's say every single week, but maybe every quarter you hold a really large event, little things like knowing what your next event is at your current event so you can start getting signups from people who are already there and just putting it in the back of their mind, starting to communicate 6 weeks out, 8 weeks out instead of waiting till the month of. Little things like that, letting them know what their volunteer position is going to be or what it's going to look like rather than saying, just agree to volunteer and we'll figure it out as we get closer. Little things like that, the further out that you can make some of those choices, make volunteers feel more comfortable to say yes to working with you. And because you're giving them enough time and preparation, they're more likely to show up because they will prioritize it in their calendar. Now, I know some of you might be saying, but there's a certain generation now that doesn't want to miss out on stuff. And so they won't say yes because they want to keep their options open. This is something where you need to get really, really good at getting them connected to the vision for your organization. Because if your vision is strong enough and if you connect with their heart strong enough, they do care about people. And so they will be willing to commit regardless of their age. So if you're finding that people aren't committing, that might not be a generational issue. It might be that there is another skill that you can continue to grow in as you are fixing your volunteer schedule.
So another thing that came up big time when we were doing our volunteer scheduling was we were using a platform called Planning Center, and a lot of other like church leaders out there know what this platform is. It's great for organizing your volunteer schedules, and it also has some really useful communication tools where you'll send emails and have people respond back for scheduling. And there may be other platforms out there for other volunteer opportunities or whatever you're using to communicate with your volunteers. Number 2 is don't lean on the platform to be your communication tool.
Yes. This was something that had to become a massive change. So often when the communication is available on there, it's easy for people to say, you know what, if they're getting email from there, that should be enough. And the platforms, they can communicate in some ways. They can send out reminder emails, maybe texts, but the communication isn't what the volunteers are looking for. And it doesn't give the capacity for the volunteers to be cared for. And so a lot of times it's better to just assume that these platforms, while really great, look at them as like their tools, and the emails and the other stuff that they send out are kind of like a bonus to the system that I personally have set up to make sure that my volunteers are being communicated with, that they know what's coming up, and that they're being cared for in the process. Now, if you have quite a few volunteers, you might be like, there's no way that I can be the one to communicate and care for 120 plus volunteers. And so with that, that also means creating some sort of system so that you have help with that communication.
Right. Bringing up other leaders within your team to help you not just communicate, but also care for people, asking if they need anything, if they need any resources, if they need any training, if they feel like a little bit of just like coaching time or whatever. Remember, volunteers are there voluntarily, and we have an opportunity to invest in them. And that's what they want. They want to help, but they also want to be invested in. They want to be trained. They want to be communicated with. They want to be recognized. And those tools, these platforms that have communication tools, are great for organization, but they're not great for building up people. And so you have to remember that the tools, communication is a good organizational tool, but it's not a great care tool. Right. So incorporate systems and structures within your leadership, within your schedule, your own like time schedule, to make sure that people are actually getting real human contact that cares, that's offering to invest in them. And leading to number 3, investing in people is a huge deal.
Yes. So the next thing that we want to do, as soon as you get these first 2 things figured out, you'll suddenly have a little bit more time. And the next thing that we want you to do is to build a shallow end of the pool for the team that you are scheduling for. So when we talk about bringing in volunteers, we like to talk about having a shallow end of the pool. With us, a lot of our volunteers are people who are highly skilled with very specific skills. And so if someone random came up to us and said, I'm interested in volunteering, we didn't necessarily want to throw them into a part of the pool where you had to be able to survive in 12 feet of water. You know, we wanted a way for them to get introduced to the team, see what their skills are, see if it might be a good fit, and then had longevity and time to train them once they figured out what they wanted to do. And those simple areas that don't take a high level of skill, but still are important and allow the person to get to know us and the team and the work that will be happening and see if they even like being in the water. That's what we call the shallow end of the pool. Mm-hmm. These are roles that pretty much anyone can be easily trained to be able to do them, but they still provide value. So people aren't just showing up going, they just made up this fake role and I'm standing here doing nothing. That's not what we're talking about. But we are talking about creating those simple areas so that you can actually be bringing in people into the system within your team so that over time, your schedule becomes easier to fill because you are naturally creating more volunteers who are automatically or who have already committed to being a part of your team.
Here's how this played out practically. I actually saw this being modeled at a different church, and I said to myself, this is genius. We need to implement this right away. And so I was over the creative ministry. So we had people who were really great at lighting, like doing light shows, basically, sound design. We had musicians. We had people who knew how to create stage design sets. It was like a big theatrical production, basically, every single weekend. And what we realized that the shallow end of the pool that this church was doing was their backstage crew, their stage hands, people who were communicating backstage on like walkie-talkies and like that kind of stuff, right? So they could train somebody from, say, the youth group or someone who's just kind of interested in helping out. Or if they're like, I don't really know where to serve, we're like, hey, anybody can be part of stage crew with just a little bit of training. And it's a really cool opportunity to see behind the scenes and kind of how things work. And what was neat about that is it was easy to learn, easy to get involved, and it exposed them to all these different areas that did require more skill and more training to do. And if they expressed an interest in learning, it was really easy now because they had relationships formed from actually working side by side with these skilled people to say, hey, can I apprentice under you and start to learn how to do sound design. Can I learn how to do some of this light design stuff? Because it looks really cool. Hey, I really like, some people hate heights, but I like heights. I want to get up in the ceiling and like change out light fixtures. And it turned into this really, really cool thing where young people, old people, everywhere in the middle were able to get involved and learn in the process. And it was a way for them to kind of naturally grow into it instead of saying, hey, you want to be a part of the sound team? You're going to have to train for 6 months, and then you're going to have to be with somebody else for another 6 months. And on the meantime, you're just there training. You're not doing anything. You're bored.
Right. And this saves you a ton of time as a leader. What we found as people join the shallow end of the pool, a lot of people within a couple of months would get out of the shallow end of the pool. Mm-hmm. They would think, this is a team I'm really interested in. They would come, hang out, volunteer for a bit, get to know the team. And, you know, like a lot of volunteer opportunities, we don't always know what we're getting into, or we think it's something that we're interested in. And then it turns out to be not quite the right fit. And this made it really easy for people to come in, check it out, and then leave if they needed to, or come in, check it out, and get more involved as they wanted to without it blowing up other parts of our schedule. Because once you have it at a place where you are scheduling 2 months out consistently, and you're starting to see things working and your communications taken care of to the point where often you aren't even the point of contact handling all the communication, but you have team members under you. The last thing you want to do is create your first volunteer role as something that people come in, and then if they opt out, you're suddenly back to where you were at the beginning of this whole process.
Right.
So create something that has high value for what you're doing, but also is something that if someone leaves, it's easy enough to fill with other volunteers that it's not going to make your whole team start to crumble, because we don't want to end up back in that situation again.
Now, if you're thinking to yourself, I just need more volunteers, and I think I could set up the shallow end of the pool. We need so many volunteers. We actually found a Reddit post a little while ago about another nonprofit that was having that exact same problem, trying to figure out how to get an influx of a lot of volunteers to be able to do some massive stuff. And we had some really great conversation as a result. So you might find that extremely valuable. There's a link popping up on the screen right now, and we'll see you over there.